to this neighborhood, neighbor.
I am the Martian ambassador.
Des Moines. Max World. We talk about the issues and topics that matter most to you. And as always, it's your voice we want to hear in Max World. So join the conversation by calling 515-244-0077. And now, here's the host of Max World Live, J. Michael McCoy.
Good afternoon, 6 minutes after 4 o'clock on the 23rd day of March in the Lord's year 2016. I'm J. Michael McCoy. A very special day in my life. It was the day that my youngest daughter was born 29 years ago today at Iowa Methodist Hospital, Samantha Kay. And we had lunch today, and I gave her a donut with a candle on it, and she loves me, and she told me so, and that's nice, because my kids did not have it easy growing up with a guy like me, and it's nice that they still call me Dad and they love me. Don't ever. If you're a dad, and you've got kids that call you Dad, and you think, well, I'm entitled to that, you're not. Father is what you're probably entitled to, but Dad is something you earn. I didn't earn it all my life, and for my kids to still call me Dad, it's one of the best gifts that they give me. So if you're called Dad, don't take it for granted. Dad's a great name, one of my favorite. All right, I've got two pieces of breaking news. One is sad, and one is humorous. I'll do the humorous one first. Guess what they found hopping through Norwalk today?
I hope it was a bunny.
Kangaroo.
In Norwalk?
In Norwalk, Iowa.
That is awesome.
They have no idea where he came from.
Shoot it. Somebody shoot it.
No, what? No!
If it's not a regulated animal by the definitions of our hunting regs, I think you can shoot it. That's why you can shoot mountain lions.
Why would you want to shoot a kangaroo?
Because it might taste delicious. You don't know.
All right, let's go to the stuff that's really sad. Dateline, Earlham, Iowa. A worker died in an explosion last night. The explosion occurred at the Martin Marietta Earlham Quarry in Earlham, Iowa. A Madison County Sheriff says Tracy Hockmeyer, 42 of Winterset, had been blasting rock when the accident occurred. Hockmeyer was walking away from the routine blast when the debris hit and killed him. The explosion happened around 6:30 p.m., about 2 miles from the gate. Now, you say, well, Mac, you said this was breaking news. They're just now releasing the name. So people who knew Tracy probably were aware of this already, but in case you didn't know, that happened last night at Martin Marietta in Earlham, Iowa. All right, we are in the midst of Holy Week. I was telling Chris earlier that... it was Holy Week of 2010 when I decided I was going to put the plug in the jug, and I quit drinking. Now, in those days, it was the last week of April, and it was the beginning of May, because it was actually, I think, Easter that year. I think Easter that year would have been about the 8th of May. Perhaps it was the 1st of May, but something in that. But it was on the 10th. That I gave it up. And it was the week before Palm Sunday that one of my pastors gave the sermon about addictions. And what he would do is he would say, pick a row any row in this church, and count to 10 people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Number 10 and number 9, you're alcoholics. Give it up. Stop it. Number 8, you don't realize it yet, but you are too. Number 7, you're having an affair. God knows it. Stop it right now. You're about to destroy your family. Number 5 and number 4, you're drug addicts. No, I don't mean marijuana and LSD. I mean you abuse painkillers and you abuse other drugs, mood-altering drugs. Number 3 and number 2, you're into pornography. And it's destroying your heart and it's destroying your mind. And God is crying for you to return to Him without that evil filth between your ears. And number 1, only God knows what you have, but it's something. And pray that He relieves you of that pain. And as my pastor did that sermon, he would take a long iron or steal, I guess that's the same, chain. And every time he'd name an addiction, he'd put another wrap around his neck. And even though my pastor's a tall man and strong, eventually he could hardly move. And I felt the weight of that sin on me. And God started working on my heart that week before Palm Sunday, and I began to reach out to people. And before we knew it, on the 10th of May, so far, with God's grace, I have not had a drink in almost 6 years. In fact, I've got a little ditty on my phone here that I can exactly tell you how many nights I've gone to bed without having a cocktail, which was a big deal for 16 years in my life. For 16 years, I drank a liter of gin every night. Today is day 2145. 2145 days I've gone to bed without a drink, and God willing, it'll be 2146 tomorrow. So Holy Week has always been a time when I felt God reaching into me and using what I knew was an important week in my quote unquote, and I'm doing air quotes here, my religious life. So every Holy Week that comes around, I seem to be moved and stirred a little bit more. And this year, it just seems so real to me. So I've asked 3 of my favorite pastors, Luke Tim from Living Faith Lutheran, to come in and talk about that week from the Mount of Olives and Palm Sunday all the way down to the crucifixion and the resurrection. Tomorrow, Davy Bloom will be in, and we're going to talk about it. And then on Friday, Tom Clegg. So you didn't know this, but I asked you to take a look at the book of Luke, and you have done that. But I also am interested, you were talking a little bit outside the break about the merged stories of them all.
Yeah. So one of the things I said would be useful for you to have on the show would be somebody to come in and do a reconciliation of those resurrection accounts. Because if you just read the part where the women head to the tomb, it's easy to start to get confused. Like, well, how many women were there? Because, the one author says it was Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome, and the other one says that it was Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. Another one says Mary and the other women. So, like, how many women were there? And, in one account, it seems as though Mary Magdalene is there when the other women see the angel, and then... But in another account, she appears to run back to Peter and John and say, I don't know what happened to the body of Jesus, when in the other account it says she talked to the angels who told her. So how do you reconcile this? And there's a nice, clean way to sort of understand what likely happened. And in a nutshell, I can give you like the quick 20-second version.
Well,
so
you've got 40 minutes. So no
well, but you wanted me to talk about Luke and what you didn't know.
Go ahead.
So if you look at the way the story unfolds when you merge, I probably shouldn't say merge the Gospels, but when you look to reconcile and understand how those Gospels work together, the way to understand it is it appears as though the women left from Bethany. And they were going, it's about a 2-mile hike to get to where Jesus' tomb was. So they're hoofing along the way. And as they get close, they see that there's this empty tomb. Well, Matthew records that there was an earthquake and that the stone rolled away. And the question then is, well, did the women feel the earthquake? And why isn't that recorded in the other Gospels? Well, Matthew doesn't say that while they were walking, they felt an earthquake. He's just kind of supplying the details of that's what happened. There was a giant, the ground shook, the stone rolled away, and there were some angels who showed up. So you don't have to extrapolate and say then, well, they must have felt it somehow, and why doesn't... No, it just happened at some point. That's what happened. So the women are on the way to the tomb, and then when they see that it's open, what happens is, this is again an estimation. In my opinion, this is the best way to answer the question. This theory is Mary Magdalene sees the open tomb and wigs out, and she runs back to Peter and John, right? So she's like hoofing it.
Now, do you think at this point she believes the body is stolen, or is she remembering that Jesus said he'd rise? She
reports to Peter and John. She says they've took the body. We don't know where he is. Okay. So she's not reporting a resurrection at this point. The other women then, after she runs back, but she doesn't run back to to Bethany, she runs to Jerusalem because Peter and John, while all the other disciples bailed, Peter gets as far as the courtyard, rooster crows. We all know that one. John gets all the way to the crucifixion. So the theory is that they were hanging out somewhere still in Jerusalem, which is closer. So she runs back and says to them, dude, and then they all start running towards the empty tomb, right? And while that's happening, the other women haven't left yet. They're hanging out, and then they meet some angels. And the angels are like, hey, why are you looking here? He's not here. He's risen. Hello. He said he was going to do that. And those women head back to Bethany to tell the other disciples, 8 disciples. And then in that time frame is when Peter and John show up at the tomb and run inside, see that he's not there, marvel at these things. And that's when Mary Magdalene has her encounter with Jesus. So I know that sounded a little bit crazy and convoluted. Maybe it's a little bit hard to follow, but if you just Google it, to be honest, and Google how to reconcile the resurrection accounts, there's actually several theories that make the timeline work really well. That's the one that I find most plausible, that when they got to the tomb, saw that it was empty, Mary Magdalene just turns and runs for Peter and John. That's what she knows to do. And the other women hang out. So that's what makes sense to me. But let's talk about the Gospel of Luke.
Well, and we'll come back to that. We're going to take our first break, and we're going through the Holy Week story with Luke Tim, according to the Gospel of Luke. No, as much as he'd like to say he didn't write it. He's a little young for that, although he does have a pretty good handle on it. It's Holy Week here, live in Mac's World. 244-0077. Your questions for Luke or anyone else, always welcome on The Truth 99.3.
Credit cards are like grandkids. They love you, sometimes get out of control, and it's fun to get a new one. Who can stop them from piling on?
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of Des Moines. At the end of the day, you can return the grandkids, but you're stuck paying off bad credit card debt. We'll help you put the fun back into using credit cards responsibly. Right, kids?
Yeah!
If you need help getting credit cards off your back, call Consumer Credit of Des Moines.
Hi, my name is David Burrier, your Hope Coach. I host a live weekly talk show called I've Been There every Thursday afternoon at 5:30, right here on webcast1live.com, and on my weekly radio program Saturday mornings at 10 on Truth Network 99.3 FM. I interview common everyday people who have survived incredible life challenges and who testify to God's faithfulness in the midst of their storms. So join me as we bring a message of hope and encouragement. Everybody needs hope. I know, because I've been there.
Hey everybody, I brought Northern Lights Pizza! And it's got Graziano sausage!
Rock and Prevention is celebrating 25 years of creating a caring community. We want to say thank you to the tens of thousands of Rock High School mentors that have carried our message of health, love, and encouragement to over 1.5 million children, teachers, and parents. Our mentors teach children methods and skills to prevent bullying and drug use. Thank you to all the school administrators, teachers, and counselors for their opportunity to serve you. Rock on, fair citizens. Rock on. This is Pat McManus for Rock and Prevention, the Richard O. Jacobson Foundation, and this station.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
.421, 21 minutes after 4 on the 23rd day of March in the Lord's year 2016. So I put something on my Facebook about today being the 29th birthday of my youngest daughter, Samantha. Now, let me tell you what's great about Facebook. I know a lot of people, pardon, I've got it stuffed up today. A lot of people will tell you all the things that are bad about Facebook. In fact, Chris Roloff, our station manager, is even making a conscious effort to try to back off of social media. But here's what's good about it, and I had completely forgot about this. So this lady gets on this Dawn is her name, and she shares the last name of Samantha, and her daughter was born the same day in the same hospital. And the reason she remembers, her husband wanted a girl so bad that he was going to take my baby, Samantha, and then later on just tell the nurses to whatever baby they had to put it in with our crib, and so it was like a switched baby thing. Now, that's 29 years ago, and this memory gets to come back to me straight from Mom and Dad only because of Facebook. I mean, I just think that's divine. You know, I know that Facebook and internet and movies and games and everything that we invent, the accuser can make for bad. I understand that. But God can and will make everything for good. It's said so in Romans. Here's an example of 29 years after my daughter was born. And I'm sure I knew this story 29 years ago. I just don't recall it. Here's this mother sharing my daughter's birthday as it's also her daughter's birthday in a memory that we were born 12 hours apart in the same hospital.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. It is. So, Don, thank you for coming forward today. All right, it's the Holy Week, as you know, and I've asked 3 of my favorite pastors to come in. None of them could come in, so I'm stuck with these 3. But Luke Tim is here from Living Faith, 8:30, 10:30, Easter services, Easter morning. And I want to walk through the final days of Jesus on the Mount of Olives, the Palm Sunday rush, Maundy, Thursday, which is tomorrow, Good Friday, finally the crucifixion, and then the resurrection. So what do you want to share with me first?
Well, you know, I was talking with some people recently about Luke and the gospel at the end here where he portrays Holy Week. And I just preached a sermon on this last week, and I hope to get that online either yet today or tomorrow. So you can check that out at clivechurch.com or on my Facebook page if you find it out there too. But one of the things that I really like about the way Luke writes his Holy Week experience is the way that Jesus simply commandeers all sorts of stuff. He just takes things and makes them his own. And I was talking to a cop buddy of mine before the service this last week, and I was like, you know, in those movies where the cop runs up to a car and flashes his badge and is like, "I'm commandeering your vehicle," and the guy has to get out and you get the car?
Yeah.
I was like, can cops really do that? And my police officer friend was like, "No, that is not an actual thing. Yeah, that's pretty illegal." So I used it in the sermon, but I had to say that it was a Hollywood thing. It didn't count. But Jesus commandeers stuff for his own purpose all the time. So just look at in the Gospel of Luke, when we look at the triumphal entry, let's just start there in 19. The first thing you're thinking of is, he commandeers a colt, right? Like he does that. Well, Yes, but what are they saying when he rides into town? Blessed is the King. This is verse 38. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory on earth. That's Zechariah 9, verse 9. Zechariah 9 is talking about the King from Zion. I mean, this is a huge deal. So if you flip over, I've got a window open here. That's Zechariah 9. The coming of the King of Zion. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your King is coming to you. Righteous and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Jesus is commandeering a prophecy in the Old Testament and saying, guess what? That's about me. But yes, he also then, there's a cult, there's a guy who owns this critter, right, who's hanging out, and the guy's like, well, hey, what are you doing? Listen, Jesus has need of it. This is what's going to happen. He's going to take this thing for his purpose. If you look at, skipping ahead here a little bit in the week, the cleansing of the temple happens. He takes, in verse 46, he says...
46 what, 20?
No, this is chapter 19 again still, yeah.
All right, go ahead.
46, he says, saying to them, it is written, my house shall be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers. He's again taking text from the Old Testament, and he's saying, this is about what I'm about to do here and now. So he cleanses the temple. He's teaching in the temple day and night. Now we're going to move ahead to chapter 20. Chapter 20, he's got all of these teachings, Sadducees, the resurrection he's talking about, who is the Son of Christ. If you look at verse 41 and 42, he said to them, how can they say that Christ is David's son? Well, for David himself says in the book of Psalms, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. David thus calls him Lord, so how is he his son? He's co-opting, again, a relationship in the Old Testament of David and the Psalms that he wrote. And I'm going really fast here, but
I want to stop and ask you a question.
Yeah, sure.
Can I? So, did Jesus know that he just quoted Zechariah, that he just quoted Psalms?
Absolutely. And
did it intentionally.
Yep, and part of that is evidence of good parenting and of a wonderful mother. So, who is it that taught Jesus all of these things? Well, it would be Joseph and Mary. Now, Joseph is suspiciously absent. We don't know if he died when Joseph or when Jesus was young. We know at about 12 we see Joseph, but we don't see him again. So we don't know when that happened. But Jesus had been in the temple. Jesus had been around scribes who were reading the scriptures. So he was well-versed. So absolutely he knows that he's quoting these things.
Why does he have to be taught that by his mother or father or anyone else? Why isn't that something God just gifted him with, that memory?
Right. Well, we talk about Jesus.
I mean, after all, he's already got the memory in a way, doesn't he?
Yes.
Because he's God.
One of my favorite... cartoons. I think it was Larson who wrote it. I'm not entirely sure. It's baby Jesus, and he's sitting on top of the water in the bathtub, and his mom's yelling at him, like, knock that off. Well, there's a stage of humility, and then there's the stage of exaltation when it comes to Jesus, and we call this the communication of attributes. How it is that the divine and the human coexisted and intermingled. Maybe that's not the best word. How they interacted with each other is maybe a better way to say it. So the divine part of Jesus, he put in a state of humiliation. In other words, he reduced them down. Because truly, if he's fully God, as a baby, he wouldn't have cried when he was hungry, right? He would have just looked at his mom and be like, as a tiny little 1-week-old baby, and be like, Mommy, I'm hungry. Please give me a steak. But he doesn't. He's a baby who doesn't have teeth yet, so he has to develop teeth. So he progresses through humiliation, and then he progresses through exaltation. Now, there's a bit of a side. Sorry about that. But Jesus does have to learn. He has to learn how to walk. The God of all creation, who invented all things, put himself in a state of humiliation so that he had to learn how to walk and talk. He learned how to read.
But why do you say a state of humiliation? Why isn't it to prove once again that he is one of us, because he had to do the same things we've done, just like getting baptized from John the Baptist?
Good question. And it's not humiliation in the sense of, that's one of those churchy theologian words that people mess up. It's not humiliation like it's humiliating. It's being humbled. He humbled himself.
Okay. Being teachable.
So in the state of humiliation, it's really about being humbled. So what he's doing now is he's moving into a new state where he's taking things by right of authority. He's saying this stuff is actually mine, and he's going to progress in this. I'm going to skip ahead because this has a huge implication over his claim on us, right? So you get to 22, and you get to the Passover that he's going to celebrate with the disciples. So verse 7 of 22. Now we're on Thursday night. Wednesday is when
you got a half hour yet. Don't get us there too quick.
There's a lot here, brother.
Okay.
Let me tell you. So this is Thursday. Wednesday, so we have Monday, we've got the cleansing of the temple. Tuesday, we've got some preaching and proclaiming. Wednesday is when we've always thought that Judas is probably making some deals, some back room door deals. And then Thursday is when he is with his disciples, and they're going to celebrate the Passover. It's the beginning of the Day of Unleavened Bread.
Which is a meal that the Jews would celebrate anyway.
Yes. And
so Jesus didn't invent Passover as far as the meal.
Wrong! Jesus totally invented that.
Okay.
But he invented that thousands of years before that for the Israelites, because it was God who authored the Passover, and Jesus, being God, is part of that authoring of the Passover, right? So when the Israelites go through the Passover and the angel of death passes over,
right,
the firstborn dies, blood on the doorpost, Paschal lamb, all that kind of stuff, that is actually authored by Jesus. Which drives home the point that I was making this last Sunday, is the difference between me and Jesus. Well, one of the differences between me and Jesus, there's plenty, but one of them is that I own stuff, in that I have possession of things and I can legally prove I own it. Jesus authors stuff. He takes things where there is nothing and makes a thing. And that's a huge difference. The example I used in my sermon this last Sunday is I can own a book without having written it. Mm-hmm. That doesn't give me the right to go, I'm going to change this part and then resell that book and go, hey, go read this book. I wrote this book. No, I didn't. I took somebody else's work and monkeyed with it.
Yeah.
Jesus is an author and a creator. So he created the Passover. He created the donkey, by the way. He created the guy who was there who owned the donkey. And he's starting to flex on that and say, I'm the author of these things. And so now we're really seeing him start to get to the peak of that point where he's bringing and saying, this is all of my stuff. I get to decide how it's used. So we're going to look really quick at the Passover and look at all of the elements of the Passover that Jesus then essentially co-ops and says, this is my stuff. If you look at verses 8 and 9, where are we going to have this Passover? Where are we going to do this? Jesus says, go and find a room, and here's where it's going to be, and you're just going to tell this guy that his house is now my house, and it's the house of the Lord, because we're going to celebrate the Passover there. And if you look then at the table, he claims all of that stuff. He says, all of this is mine. The whole festival, the whole Passover meal, he says, this is actually about me. He takes, if you look at verse 17, he takes a cup when he had given thanks. He says, take this and divide it among you. I tell you from now on, I will not drink of it till the vine of the kingdom of God comes. He took bread, having given thanks, he broke it and said, this is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Likewise, the cup, this is the cup poured out for you for the covenant in my blood. He says, bread and wine might be something you own. But Jesus says, it's something I created and authored and invented, and I'm telling you it's not bread and wine, it's body and blood. You and I don't have the right to do that or the ability to do that, but God does in his authority.
Luke Tim is with us today from Living Faith Lutheran Church. Services 8:30 and 10:30 on Easter morning. It's 142nd and Hickman, just there on the southwest corner. Heartland Presbyterian is closest to Hickman. Living Faith is behind that. When we come back, where was the upper room? A lot of different people think they know whose house it was. Do you? We'll talk about it live next with Pastor Luke here on The Truth.
Northern Lights Pizza's amazing garlic butter makes amazing breadsticks. Now available in 12-ounce bottles at Northern Lights, Hy-Vee, and Graziano's.
Northern Lights Pizza.
I'm Brian Leach, owner of Service Legends, and my position is Chief Talent Officer.
I'm Nicholas Wonderscheid.
I am Bernie Hobbs.
And I'm the Service Manager.
Marketing Director and Client Relations Manager.
Everything that we do is about ensuring that we exceed your expectations.
Our clients are important to us. 100% satisfaction.
We're not just focused on heating and cooling. That's the easiest part of our job, actually, is fixing furnaces and air conditioners.
Everyone that we come in touch with, we want to improve lives.
Bottom line is, we've got our installation guarantees, 25% energy savings guarantee, comfort guarantee, temperature selection guarantee, property protection guarantee.
100% satisfaction guaranteed, fixed rate or it's free.
All of those guarantees are backed up with a 100% money back guarantee to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that you get what you're after.
Just fixing the problem today. If they have another problem 5 days down the road, it's still fixed rate or it's free.
We use what's called straightforward pricing. Our technicians are going to give you an exact to-the-penny price on what it's going to take before they move forward with any repair. That way you know what to expect.
It's the same price every day.
No surprises.
If you get off work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you come home, you realize that, oh, my furnace is broken. Now you need to call somebody out that night. You shouldn't have to pay more for that.
We're guaranteeing service 24/7.
We run afternoons, evenings, nights, weekends. We're staffed to work that.
Phone rings at 3 in the morning. You'll get one of our representatives answering the phone every time.
We're not sending you out to Timbuktu in some call center. It's our Service Legend team members, our mission control team.
I'll take a call anytime.
And then they answer the phones the same way during the day as they do at night.
It's a great day at your service company. How can we make you smile?
That's the only way to provide true 24-hour service.
When you're able to let somebody actually live in their home safely when they weren't able to do that before, where they don't have to stay up at night and worry about, is the heat going to come back on? Are we going to freeze the pipes? Is the baby in the room next door going to be sick because they got too cold? When you're able to help somebody overcome challenges like that, that's impacting a life. That makes a difference. I get goosebumps thinking about it.
I love the team. I love the people that I work with.
We have fun, but we work hard.
I call them my ambassadors of legendary service. If you could just envision what that is, that's who we're sending to your home.
They literally will call in, pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I want to talk to your manager. And I get on the phone, they're like, that technician that was at my house was the greatest technician ever. That's cool to me.
We want to brighten people's days.
Every person that we have going into the house has gone through an extensive background check.
Drug testing, we have a very thorough interview process that 1 out of 140 people make it through.
If we promise you something, that's what you're going to get, no matter what.
We're here when you need us to protect the safety and comfort of your family.
If you're not happy, we're going to make it right.
If we're willing to put 100% money back guarantee on what we do, what type of work do you think we do?
Give us a call. We're there for you 24/7, 365 days a year.
Enough said.
Bob, you have to stop bringing peanuts in. Because I put them in my mouth in the middle of the break thinking I'll be done. And all I have is peanut butter in my mouth now. 4:38, 22 minutes for the top of the hour, Salem Radio Network News, and then Hank, the Bible Answer Man. 1-888-ASK Hank. Nationwide, worldwide program. And you can get the opportunity to ask Hank anything you want about the Bible. But you can also do that with Luke right now at 244-0077. We're talking about Holy Week. Prefer you keep your questions to Holy Week. But if God has laid upon a question on your heart, and you really want to ask a good pastor that, call up 244-0077. We can take that rabbit trail because, after all, it is Easter, and Easter's all about rabbits.
Bunnies. Yep, that's all I know.
What's that story about that whole thing?
Okay, so...
It was the fertility god, right?
No, probably not, but maybe. There's this meme that's out there, right? There's this recurring story that, it's a pagan holiday and this and that. Named after, and I don't say this right, Bob does a better job of pronouncing German or Old English. What is it? Estere?
Yeah.
And it's Estermonte. It's the month of Estere. So there was a guy whose name is Bede, and about 700 AD or so, somewhere in that century, 8th century, he was writing and was talking about the celebration of Easter. But they didn't call it Easter. So it wasn't always called Easter. It was called the Paschal, and about the Paschal lamb, right?
Paschal.
Yep. So the Paschal lamb, but Easter was called Pascha.
Okay.
So this guy Bede was writing about it and was like, they celebrated during Eastermonte. It's the month of Esther or whatever. And this English monk, he's a Christian English monk, wrote something about because of it, in this month where they celebrate, they named this month because of the goddess Estera, whatever it is. There's been very little corroboration anywhere else that goddess actually exists. We haven't found it anywhere else. It's really named after the month in which it was celebrated in England and Germany, which was, again, before England, Germany borders were what they are today by any means, stretch the imagination. So it really isn't this pagan holiday, goddess of fertility, all that kind of stuff. That's a myth, but it sticks because people who want to, every year I always say, we're just waiting for, the last few weeks before Easter, somebody to disprove Easter, and it happens every year. The History Channel, Discovery Channel, somebody puts something out, and it's always bunk. It's not true. But so you didn't tell me where bunnies came from. The bunnies were added much later because as the folklore continued on about this hypothetical goddess Estera, which they're not entirely sure actually existed anywhere, they said, well, it's spring and it's fertility, and in that area there was nothing more spring and fertile than bunnies. Okay. So that's all it really... Well, Bob, we can just give up on this whole radio thing and just, we've got all the answers now. Clearly.
Well, that's not all of the answers, but a few.
So we're at the point in the book of Luke, chapter 22, when the festival of the unleavened bread, we call it the Last Supper. I've always heard that this was Lazarus's house. That is a theory, and I really hate to speculate on those theories. Here's what's interesting. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. I like to say Mark. I like to say that this is part of that story. And there was some speculation by early church fathers that it was Mark, and this is the connection that Peter and Mark eventually have. But regardless, let's take a look at what's more important about this is it appears as though Jesus has maybe even had a conversation with this guy ahead of time. But if not, I tend to say not. He doesn't make any preparations to eat the Passover until it's ready to start. Okay. What is that? What does that tell me? I think Jesus knows Judas is looking for an opportunity. And if he in the morning says, oh yeah, in 12 hours I think we're going to go and hang out with this guy and eat the Passover at his house, Judas would have an opportunity to orchestrate the arrest there. And I think he doesn't, Jesus that is, doesn't say in advance where he's going to have the meal because he wants to have this meal before the betrayal. He's taking control of Judas's plan of evil. So this kind of... All right, commandeering. Yep, it folds back into that concept of what Jesus is commandeering. And even the covenant that he says, this covenant is in my blood, he's taking on the contract of blood that has been humanity's contract with God since the first critter died so that Adam and Eve wouldn't be naked anymore in the garden. God kills an animal and covers them with skin. And then there is the circumcision covenant that requires the blood of young boys cut. And then there is all of the blood sacrifices in the Old Testament. It's always been about blood. And what he says is, this covenant is now in my blood. It's mine. He takes the covenant. He takes the contract between humanity and God on himself. He does this over and over again. Even so, Peter's cowardice. We have Jesus foretelling Peter's denial. And he says, your weakness and your cowardice, I'm going to take that, I'm going to commandeer that and make it about me and about my forgiveness of you and restoration of you at a later time. So what does this do? All the way time out. Sorry. Just let me stop you for a minute. Is there any significance to us in 2016 that Peter denied him?
There's a ton of significance to that.
Is that just in that we deny Jesus ourselves when we're pressed by authority or pressed by somebody who could hold it against us in a negative way? Is that so we'll be able to associate with Peter and understand, oh yeah, if they were going to come and cut off my head, I'd probably say I didn't know him either.
What's useful to do is to hold, and this strays a little bit from the Gospel of Luke, which I think is okay. So what's useful to do is to recognize in ourselves Peter and Judas. We have traits of both of them in our hearts, right? Betrayal, turning away, disowning, saying, I do not know him. That's part of our sinful DNA. But it's more critical to look at the difference between Judas and Peter's denial and betrayal and understand that nuance. The difference between the two and how that applies to us is far more significant. So the question isn't about will you betray Jesus? And I really have a distaste for those who say, in that moment in time, when you're questioned, the gun is pointing at you, will you betray Jesus? I might, because I'm a wuss. I'm scared of stuff. And Peter did. Peter's scared of bad guys hurting him. I'm weak. I'm frail. I would love to be the guy who's like, yeah, I would stand there and take a bullet and burn out. You know what? People talk like that are speaking out of insecurity.
Well, I said once on the air, Bob, you probably remember this. I said this once on the air, that if I had an ISIS guy run in here right now and say either deny Christ or I'm going to kill you, God knows my heart. Jesus knows my heart. Anything I say to this bozo isn't going to change how much blood he shed for me and the grace that he gives me. Therefore, if I'm going to save my life so I can protect my family and other people, yeah, okay, forget Jesus.
Yep.
But boy, did I catch heck for that from my listeners.
Well, the whole scenario is ridiculous, right? This whole concept of this is how God judges you under tremendous stress and incredible pressure in the heat of the moment. You have to make the right call or you will burn in hell forever.
Yeah, no.
That's not exactly...
No.
Or... not at all how God handles issues of salvation. The way he handled the issue of salvation is that Jesus takes and eliminates that from the equation and says, I got humanity. This is my thing. And he goes to the cross and he says, so all of these things that he said, I'm taking this, your tradition, your meal, your Paschal stuff, all this, I'm taking your house, I'm taking your donkey, I'm taking the covenant, I'm taking your sin, I'm taking that, it's mine, and I'm going to go to the cross.
Okay, when we come back, 2-minute break. When we come back, we're going to get you to Resurrection Sunday with Luke Tim from Living Faith Lutheran, 142nd and Hickman. Services Easter Day, Easter Sunday, 8:30 and 10:30. Be a great place for you to visit. We're coming back live.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Credit cards are like grandkids. They love you, sometimes get out of control, and it's fun to get a new one. Who can stop them from piling on?
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of Des Moines. At the end of the day, you can return the grandkids, but you're stuck paying off bad credit card debt. We'll help you put the fun back into using credit cards responsibly. Right, kids?
Yeah! If you need help getting credit cards off your back, call Consumer Credit of Des Moines.
Rockton Prevention is celebrating 25 years of creating a caring community. We want to say thank you to the tens of thousands of Rock High School mentors that have carried our message of health, love, and encouragement to over 1.5 million children, teachers, and parents. Our mentors teach children methods and skills to prevent bullying and drug use. Thank you to all the school administrators, teachers, and counselors for their opportunity to serve you. Rock on, fair citizens, rock on! This is Pat McManus for Rockton Prevention, the Richard O. Jacobson Foundation, and this station.
Northern Lights Pizza, your home of the tasty crust. Our garlic butter sauce now available in 12-ounce bottles at Northern Lights, Hy-Vee, and Graziano's.
Northern Lights Pizza.
Hi, my name is David Burrier, your Hope Coach. I host a live weekly talk show called I've Been There every Thursday afternoon at 5:30, right here on webcastonelive.com, and on my weekly radio program Saturday mornings at 10 on Truth Network 99.3 FM. I interview common, everyday people who have survived incredible life challenges and who testify to God's faithfulness in the midst of their storms. So join me as we bring a message of hope and encouragement. Everybody needs hope. I know, because I've been there.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Ten minutes before the top of the hour, we are coming on just a few minutes left in the program, so I'm just going to give it to you because I'd like you to get to the resurrection for my audience today, and I know you've only got about 7 minutes, so I'll try not to interrupt.
Oh, it's hard to do. I know. You've got so many wise things to say to a young whippersnapper like me, but let me get it done. All right, so we've got Jesus, then, as I was just saying, he continues to take these things. We're going to jump to 23. We're kind of skipping a little bit of Pilate and Herod, where Luke records Jesus ping pong, right? Bounces back and forth between the two. Neither one wants to, because Pilate and Herod have, to make a really long story short, they have competition as far as their areas of influence politically, and neither one of them wants to be the one to pull the trigger on Jesus. So finally, Pilate delivers him to be crucified, and you hear this over and over again, right? When they're calling for his crucifixion, they're saying, crucify him, crucify him. The vitriol, the anger, the violence, Jesus, he takes all of that stuff, but he doesn't take it like the tough guy, Rocky Balboa taking one on the chin. He's taking these things that people intend for evil, intend to kill and destroy, and he's saying, no, this is what I am going to use for my own glory. So Jesus is even repurposing, reauthoring not just the meals and the traditions and all that. He's reauthoring people's emotions and people's sin and even the story of evil. So Jesus, in 23, is laid to rest. About the 6th hour, darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. The sun's light fades. The curtain of the temple is torn in two. Jesus calls with a loud voice, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And having said this, he breathed his last. When the centurion had seen what had taken place, he praised God. Certainly this was an innocent man. These things happen. Jesus then is buried. He is buried in a tomb by a guy who's Joseph of Arimathea. We know that story pretty well. Requests the body, takes it there.
When Pilate asked Arimathea why he would take a rude, reckless rebel like Jesus and put him in his incredible tomb, Arimathea looked at Pontius Pilate and said, just a weekend gig.
That's right. He'll be out by Sunday. So we're going to go then. We got to get to the resurrection because this is the thing.
Yeah,
so
I know.
Chapter 24.
Big thing is the big thing.
The big thing is the big thing. The first day of the week, at early dawn, they went to the tomb, taking the spices they had prepared. These women are going to do on the first day what they couldn't do on Saturday. That's important to know. Why couldn't they do it on Saturday? It's a Sabbath.
Can't do any work.
All right. This is why they had to get Jesus off of the cross. So when we say he was in the tomb for 3 days, they had to get him off before the Sabbath began. They had to get him off on Friday. And by the way, our days don't really match up because the Jewish people considered the day to begin and end when it was light and dark. We consider it midnight, in the middle of the night. So that's kind of a weird way to look at it. But Jesus was in the tomb Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And if he's in for any part of those days, it counts as in that day. So the scriptures don't say he was in there all of those days. It says 3 days he was in a tomb. He was in a tomb Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So Jesus takes the Sabbath, that Saturday, as rest. And so now we're going all the way back into creation, in the beginning of the book of the Bible, right? The beginning, the 6 days of creation, the 7th Saturday rest. Jesus is even pointing at that and saying, that's about me. When God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit rested at the beginning of time in creation, that was a foretelling of when Jesus would rest in the tomb between his death and his resurrection. There's fingerprints of the death and resurrection of Jesus all the way through the Old Testament, even there. So he rests and he takes the first day of the week and he recreates it. And he says, this isn't the first day of the week. This is the day we've all been waiting for. So we call it the 8th day. Christians often call it the 8th day of creation. It's why, I know there's only 7 days. You're giving me that look. I know.
No, I'm listening.
But the 8th day being, this is the new thing, newly created. It's why Christians began worshiping immediately after the resurrection on Sunday, not Saturday, because that is the day that Jesus rose from the dead. So you've got the resurrection of Jesus. The women in Luke are going and they see this 2 men stood by them, dazzling apparel. Verse 5, the women were frightened, bowed their faces to the ground. The men said to them, why do you seek the living among the dead? He's not here. He is risen. Remember how he told you while he was in Galilee that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and on the 3rd day rise? And they remembered his words. And returning from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 and to all the rest. Now as Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary the mother of James and the other women with them told these things to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. Peter rose and ran to the tomb, stooping, and looking in. He saw the linen clothes by themselves, and he went home and marveling what had happened. And then we have a couple of other appearances on the road to Emmaus, etc. But I want to wrap up Luke's account of Holy Week. Does something very specific. It proclaims the majesty of God in a term that I've always used as authorship. He said, this is my stuff, and I wrote it. And if I want to change how this story goes, I will do that. I can take the best book ever written, rip the end of it out, and put in my own ending, and I'm still not the author, and that book isn't the same book anymore. Yeah. I've ruined it.
Yeah.
Jesus says, I authored all of these things, and that means I can claim them and make them into something else. So, what does this mean for us? It means that we have nothing to fear in this world about what it is about us that we have such great anxiety and insecurities about, because God will take your pain. He will take your frustration. He will take your anger. He will take your depravity. He will take the things about you that you find embarrassing, all of those things that you wish you'd never said or done. He will say, stop, those are mine. I get to claim that. Because I created this world and I authored this world, and I get to turn it into something else. And he, because he's the author of all creation, can take that sin upon himself and say, covenant is mine. The blood now is mine. It's not going to be asked of you ever again. It never will be asked of you, because I take that blood. It's mine. And he pours his blood in our place. So the empty tomb. What does the empty tomb mean? When he says on the cross, this always blew my mind when I read and reread this. When he said on the cross, it is finished, I always said, so why did he come back? Like, if he was done. It is the proclamation. The empty tomb says, even death, I claim death as mine. So even if you die, belief in Jesus means yet shall you live. Even if you die, you put in the ground and you say, that's a terrible thing. That person, that body has to go in the ground. That person is buried. That is horrible. That is ugly. Jesus says, no, that is victory. It looks like death. It looks like loss. I tell you, that is victory. And I tell you, it's eternity.
That's why I love this man. He knows his books, knows his passion, and knows his Jesus. Luke Tim, Living Faith, 8:30, 10:30 on Sunday morning. Tomorrow, my favorite, Davey Bloom. He'll be here. He'll give us the whole story through his eyes. And Friday, Tom Clegg. 3 of my favorite guys on the radio with us today, this week. It's Holy Week here in Mac's World. Remember to forgive, because as you forgive, God promises you'll be forgiven. I'll see you in church.